Well, thank you so much, Christabel, for making the time to record this very special message for our young people at our Youth COP26 Summit. I just wondered if you could please tell us a little about yourself and about your climate activism and education journey. What motivated you to take action and set up EcoResolution and Initiative Earth?
That all started when I was, it's been a bit of a long journey, but at school I suffered from very bad anxiety. I still do today, really. And after I left school, I wanted to find a way of kind of being able to heal and face and learn how to kind of, heal that anxiety that I was having. And I found the practice of yoga and meditation to be incredibly helpful and to really help release a lot of the emotions that were trapped in my body. And that experience and that path of healing also brought me to some of the philosophy behind these ancient practices. And part of that wasn't just a philosophy, but also this experience I was having in my body of realizing that, I'm interconnected with the world around me, and what I do to the world, I do to myself, and vice versa. I'm not separate from nature. I'm not separate from you. I'm not separate from people on the other side of the world. And it was through that I had this shift in kind of consciousness and mindset, as I was also learning about the ecological destruction that's been ravaging the world, creating terrible climate migration, climate refugees, natural disasters, the fact that climate change and ecological destruction is often or always caused by those who are most privileged in the world, and yet it affects those who are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And that's obviously just wrong. And so there were these two kind of parts. There was this part about social justice, and there was this other part of kind of learning more about what it was to feel well, to feel present, to feel connected, and how that was so much attached to the world around me as well. Then there was this middle part, which was about being able to see and have faith and believe that the world could be different. So kind of with those three components, my sister and I in 2015 set up something called Advaya, which organized kind of community spaces and events and gatherings that brought people together to talk about interconnected crises that we face, and the intersections, the connections between like ecology, nature, well-being, mental health, politics and social change, and how we could kind of create community around that, because it felt, especially in 2015, like no one was talking about it in the places of the world that I was inhabiting. Then that's been going for the past 6 years. We've done loads of events and learned so much. And then in 2019, with Cara Delevingne, we decided to set up a kind of mainstream campaign that was about accessing mainstream consciousness, because Advaya was increasingly speaking to a more niche kind of community, not niche community, but it wasn't focused on climate action specifically. So we set up my EcoResolution, which went really well. And then from there, we've kind of been growing and taking people on educational journeys to learn that, we can all be part of meaningful change. The systems that are creating social injustice, environmental injustice, are systems that were created by humans, and they can be changed by humans. And in fact, every day we participate in these systems. We are validating these systems. We are recreating them through our participation in them. And that actually we can build new systems, and there's people all over the world who are doing that. And so through EcoResolution, we want to kind of ignite collective imagination, and then empower people to take action in whatever way that is for them. It can be big or small or grand or humble or anything. Anything's important. And then just lastly, that's now taken us to this other point in our journey where we were thinking, okay, well, we're doing a lot of online education, which is so important, but once you understand what's wrong with the world, not wrong with the world, but once you understand how much opportunity and potential we have to create new systems and why we need to create new systems, how do you actually do that? And whilst we need to be, getting policy change and activism and politics to be moving and shifting in a good direction, not in a bad direction, we also need to be actively restoring ecosystems and revitalizing community well-being. And so we're currently setting up a learning platform that will hopefully enable people to do that all over the world.
Well, thank you so much. It's so inspiring to hear your journey and to feel like we're part of it. So thank you so much. Many young people taking part in our summit may be thinking, I'm just one person and someone whose voice and opinion is often overlooked because of my age. I can't make a difference. What would you say to them?
I would say there's a quote, which I will read, by Neil Gaiman. He says, "We all, adults and children, have an obligation to daydream. We have an obligation to imagine. It is easy to pretend that nobody can change anything, that we are in a world in which society is huge and the individual is less than nothing. An atom in a wall, a grain of rice in a rice field. But the truth is, individuals change their world over and over. Individuals make the future, and they do it by imagining things can be different." So I love this quote. And I'm really interested in the kind of relationship between individual action, collective action, and systemic change. And I think often we can feel incredibly overwhelmed, especially when you can really understand how systemic the issues are that we face. These are interconnected systems of the economy, of trade, capitalism, globalization, corporatization. These are big kind of almost like figureless entities. So yeah, it can feel really, really overwhelming, but I think we've got to look back in history and just look at what individuals have done. And I go like this because, we might think of, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Mother Teresa, as being these incredible leaders. And of course they were, but we can't forget that behind them was a whole community of people, a movement, a network. And I think when we're, it's not down to any one individual to change the world, but I think we can, and we don't all have to be these figureheads and leaders at all, but we can all participate actively in shifting culture, society, community, your own life in a direction that is moving towards healing, towards happiness, towards health. And I think in that way, we can have a huge impact. Adrienne Maree Brown writes, "What we do on the small scale sets a pattern for the whole system." And I think that's really important. The way that you speak to the shopkeeper, to your mother, to your father, to your friend, to your teacher, the way that you smile as you get on the bus and ask how someone's day was, all the way through organizing or participating in a protest or a march or a creative action, or making sure you get proper rest so that the next day you can be, feel resilient, rejuvenated, restored, eating healthily for your body, choosing the right, not choosing the right, when possible, making decisions in the things that you're purchasing that are better for the planet. And I think, it can feel overwhelming, but I think we don't need to be necessarily focus on an end goal of like, this is what I have to achieve, this is what we need to achieve as a world or as a culture or as a, you know, as a group of people, but instead, like, this is our vision, this is what we know is possible in our mind, because we can imagine it. We can imagine, for example, nature-centered societies that revere that what is the true well-being, what is true well-being for people and for planet, building local economies that are in line with nature's principles. You know, you can imagine that it's possible. And then whatever small or big steps you can take towards that, I think that's a huge impact on the world. And always maintaining kind of compassion, acceptance, and cultivating presence and connection in your daily life. I think, yeah, that's, for me, that's the biggest impact ever.
Wow, that's incredibly insightful. And it leads straight on to the next question, which is, many of us have so many personal challenges that we are already dealing with. It's hard to also consider climate change and action on top of that. What advice would you give us linking our personal challenges to what's happening to our planet? And are they intertwined?
Definitely intertwined. Everything is interconnected. And I think it's often that, you know, we think of ourselves, humans, and then nature, and it's in our language. You know, we talk about nature, and then we talk about humans as though humans aren't part of nature. But of course, we've all kind of evolved from this one breathing, living, expanding planet. We are part of nature, and what we do to nature, we do that to ourselves, and what we do to ourselves, we do to nature. I think that's a really essential, like, piece to the puzzle, which isn't being addressed in mainstream kind of narratives. Because mental health and well-being can be, or is, overwhelming. You know, it can feel almost uncontrollable where the mind can go, where your sense of self can go. And in the same way, it's, you know, with the changes that we might want to see in culture and in politics. But I think, you know, these things are often are pulled apart as different. So mental health is kind of spoken about as though it is completely down to the individual to maintain a good mental health. Of course, individuals can cultivate and do cultivate good mental health through practices and support networks and many, many different things that I'm not qualified to go into. But I do find it strange that we don't actively link it with what's happening in our school, in our family, in our communities. I mean, it is often linked with families, but, you know, in our broader, wider communities, what's happening to the world around us is directly impacting ourselves. And the way that we have been impacted in our own lives also deeply affects how we're able to show up to the problems of the world. I think just the acknowledging that these two aspects of our existence are deeply entwined is kind of almost like enough, because I think it's just important to be aware that, you know, you're not completely responsible for all of your feelings. We do live in a world of so much incredible joy and creativity and happiness, but, you know, newspapers and the reality of a lot of things is also not that. And I think we have to give ourselves some love and acknowledgement of the fact that that's going to be impacting us all the time. Every time we see on the news like another natural disaster or another human-made disaster, that these things are directly impacting us. So yeah, I think understanding that, you know, that our personal ability to show up to challenges in our own lives and in the kind of our wider lives in the world are deeply entwined, and that self-care isn't always enough. We need, and actually probably never is enough, we also need community care, and we need ecological care so that we can fully thrive, because we are not just individuals, we are interconnected beings.
Wow, thank you so much, Christabel, for such a positive message. I was just wondering if you had a good message to end this conversation for the young people at our Youth COP26 Summit.
Yes. My message would be inspired by people like AJ Mary Brown and Rob Hopkins, and it's about your imagination. Too many of us close our eyes and think of the future and can imagine something more like Mad Max or The Matrix, and it does not have to be that way. We, collectives, communities, humans, nature, can all go in a direction which is towards brighter, happier, healthier futures. So when I invite you to close your eyes and to imagine the world in 10 years' time, when everything that you hoped could happen in the world has happened. So you might imagine the kind of, nature being able to come back into being fully thriving, biodiversity, communities being revitalized, people having nutritious food, there being no homelessness, mental health services being really supported, community spaces being supported and thriving, schooling being all free and amazing for children, really kind of imagine what it is that you think will create happier, healthier cultures, and keep coming back to that and allow that to be what guides your action in the world. So you're being guided by vision, by inspiration, by aspiration, positivity, creativity, rather than being kind of driven by fear of the future, because it doesn't need to be that way. Humans have done incredible things and continue to do incredible things. And I believe that the climate crisis isn't just, I believe that when we're facing the climate crisis, it's not just finding solutions to mitigating it. It's about finding ways that not only help solve the climate crisis, but that also transform society and get to the root of the problems and obstacles that we see today. So I find that really exciting and inspiring, and helps me continue in the work.
Oh, thank you, Christabel. I feel really inspired. I'm already imagining a more positive future, and I'm sure our young people listening to this conversation are also thinking the same. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Sorry.